Why, hello, spooky friends. Welcome to another episode of the Scarish Podcast.
Woo!
I'm Robin Grace, and this is Adam Diaz.
Hello.
And we're going to be talking about some interesting topics, as per usual.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited for this one. My topic, I'm just going to come out there and say it, is EVP. So we're not just going to be talking about some interesting stuff. We're going to be listening to some interesting stuff, too.
Am I going to EVP my pants?
You might. The first one, okay, we'll get to that. I would put on your, I don't know, what do you call them when they're adult diapers? Just adult diapers?
I don't know. There's a word for them.
I'm pretty sure there's a word for them besides adult diapers. Diapies? I'm going to go with diapies. Put on your diapies, Robin. And for those of you who are scaredy cats, I will let you know if you need to skip ahead when we're going to do the EVP stuff. But Robin, what are you covering?
All right, so I'm going to cover human sacrifice.
Human sacrifice? Yeah. That sounds interesting. I'm guessing because I know that you had a ton of research up on your screen that this one's going to be...
It was just, there's so many different things, and I'll get there.
Right on. So before we move on into our topics, let's go ahead and let people know about homegrown horrors. Robin, what is a homegrown horror?
Homegrown horrors are the paranormal and supernatural stories that you folks share with us, whether it be yours, your family, friends, grandparents, parents, cousins, uncles, aunts.
Everyone has like a scary story or a ghost story, or they know someone who does, and we love it when you share those with us. So please email storytime@scarish.com or go to our website, scarish.com, and click on Contact Us if you would like to share your story. We will read them on the episodes marked Storytime, which come out every Friday, and we actually record live every 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Wednesdays. So you can catch us at twitch.tv/scarishpodcast and youtube.com/scarish. You can get your story to us however you want. We have an Instagram that's @scarishpodcast and Twitter is @scarishpod. Facebook.com/scarishpodcast. However you want to send it. You can also send us things that you don't want read if you're just looking to share it with someone. Or you can join our Scarish Spooky Friends group on Facebook or our Discord if you kind of just want to share it with the community but aren't really looking to have it read through us. We totally get that too. But however you'd like to share your stories, please do so. That said, we have some topics to get to tonight. It is late Monday night. We did a lot of research on these, and I'm pretty excited. So, Robin, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
All right. So this week, I'm going to go towards a more scary topic other than scary-ish, because I have been listening to way too many podcasts myself, and decided to cover human sacrifice. And you'd be surprised, or maybe not so surprised, at how many cultures throughout history have practiced the act of human sacrifice. And I'm just going to cover a few of these instances in this episode, and then maybe some little extra spooky tidbitties.
Tidbitties sound kind of not spooky.
So now I want to preface this with the fact that we are by no means historians, and I just like to read about stuff and kind of share the things that I read. And some of it, or maybe a lot of it, may be inaccurate, but hopefully it's a fun treat for your ear holes. So prepare yourselves. Human sacrifice spans cultures all over the world, including Asia, there in Africa, even some here in the United States. And it's not modern-day Americans, but people were sacrificed on North American soil, which I thought was really interesting. And I'm going to start off with what got me super interested in researching the whole human sacrifice thing, and that's Hito Bashira, or human pillar.
I know you mentioned this to me before the show as your inspiration, and when you told me, I was like, gross. Recently we had our garbage can full, and we're like, why does our room smell? And we're like, oh, it's the garbage, it needs to be emptied, because it had food garbage inside of it. And so once we threw it out, we're like, oh, thank God, the mystery of why our room is stinky is solved. It's it would be a lot harder if you're like, oh, it's either the garbage or the human body built into the pillar of the home, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, well, this is only just one. Usually it's just one, and then they build the entire thing over on top of it. So it's maybe won't smell so bad that way.
So it's built into the foundation or on the lower level?
We'll get there.
Okay, cool.
All right, so Hito Bashira was formerly practiced in Japan, and it was a type of human sacrifice where they would bury people alive under large structures, whether it be dams, castles, bridges, whatever. And by burying them in this way, it was like a sacrifice to their gods, asking that whatever they were building was that it would stand the test of time, it would stop getting destroyed or whatnot, you know what I mean?
It's just so weird because I know it's my culture that's trained my brain like this, but it's so you're building a brand new structure and immediately making it haunted, but in their culture it's no, we're blessing the structure by burying a human being alive here. It's definitely weird for me.
So there was a story written in the Chronicles of Japan about an emperor Nintoku who existed in 323 AD, which is a long ass time ago. And there were the Kitakawa and Mamuta rivers that had a tendency to overflow. And they couldn't protect themselves from this river. Like any attempts, it would not work. And so one day, the emperor had a dream that gave him some miraculous solution to their problem. And in this...
He woke up like, sour cream!
Yep.
Robin's finally listening to Adventure Zone, so that's a pull from Adventure Zone.
Anytime anyone ever says sour cream now, that's all I hear is sour cream.
Realistically, he woke up, he's like, human sacrifice!
So in this dream, the emperor was told that there was a person named Kowakubi in Musashi, and then there was another person in Kawachi, that by sacrificing these people to the gods of the overflowing rivers respectively, construction of embankments along the rivers could then go off without a hitch. And from what you can guess, Kowakubi, the guy from Musashi, was thrown into the river, into one of the rivers, and they prayed to the river god after doing it. So they're just like, hey dude, go over there and you're dead now or whatever, but we're gonna build this shit. So,
but at least they knew after they did that he was certainly not a witch because he did not float.
Oh my goodness. But they did build the embankment afterwards. But the other guy escaped, sacrifice. He lived, which is cool for him, I guess.
Please tell me that the other thing that they built did not work properly.
It doesn't say. So I don't know. Probably not.
So your control group proved that you're just murderers. That's fucked up.
There's also a story in a diary from the 15th century that documents the tradition of Nagara no Hito Bashira. This tradition involved a woman carrying a boy on her back being caught while passing along the Nagara River. And she was then buried where a large bridge was then built. And I just think that's so weird that that's just a tradition that people did.
How would that be a tradition? I just don't understand how people are like, oh yeah, you gotta try it. Just bury a human alive.
It makes me wonder how many bridges in Japan have this as a part of it.
I mean, we were in Japan for 14 days. How many bridges do you think that we crossed during public trans or when we were on like any of the rails? It's like, oh, we just ran over a person.
I don't think we went to enough traditional older parts of Japan.
Were we in Kyoto?
Yeah, but we didn't really go anywhere other than the hotel. We went to
the sanctuary.
Yeah, but we just drove, petted some deer, went back to the hotel, hung out, had McDonald's, and then went home. Or we went back to Tokyo.
It was the only night we didn't have something that was like super Japanese, so we just decided to like...
I had like an upset stomach. I was super nauseous. And
it's good for that. Mickey D's.
Yeah.
That's what. They had a bunch of other stuff, though, there that was not obviously on the American menu. And it was some stuff that we had actually tried at, like, some of the convenience stores because their food is bomb.
No, yeah, we had the Japanese McDonald's food, not like... Which was we didn't have a Big Mac or anything.
We spent, like, $6 and we had, like, a feast. It was amazing.
It was great. 10 out of 10. Want to go back? Someone sponsor us. Anyway... a couple of structures that exist today that were built using this Hito Bashira, or human column, include the Maruoka Castle, which is one of the oldest surviving castles in Japan, the Matsue Ohashi Bridge, and the Matsue Castle. And the story of the Maruoka Castle can be found in the legend titled Oshizu Hito Bashira. And it's about a man named Shibata Katsutoyo, and he was building a castle in Maruoka, and the stone wall of the castle kept collapsing no matter what they did. So they kept building it up over and over and over again, but it just was not working out. So one of their, which would be in essence like a priest, suggested that they make a human sacrifice. And
solid priesting right there.
Their sacrifice came in the form of a poor one-eyed mother of two, Oshizu. And it
can't just be like a criminal who's like sentenced to death. It's like she has one eye and kids. She's the perfect candidate for human sacrifice.
So her one condition for her to become this human pillar or human column type thing was that they make one of her sons into a samurai. And so she was buried under the central pillar of the castle's keep. And soon after, the rest of the construction was completed successfully. So they did this thing, put her in the middle of it, built everything up. It was all grand, all set, good to go.
So only one of her sons, though.
Right.
So for that one, it's pretty fucking toit. But if you're the son who has his mom killed and your brother becomes a samurai.
Unfortunately for her, Katsutoyo was transferred to another province before ever making her son a samurai. So it never even happened. And
shouldn't there be a curse on that person since they broke the deal?
Legend has it that her spirit resented this and made the castle's moat overflow every single spring season. And they call it the rain caused by the tears of Oshizu's sorrow. And they've even constructed a memorial to her in attempts to appease her spirit.
Wow, that's intense.
So,
I thought you were going to have one of the sons become a samurai, the other one become a ninja, and this was the origin.
And then it becomes Game of Thrones.
No, I was thinking like Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow from G.I. Joe.
Oh my goodness, get out. So, Matsue Ohashi Bridge has a park located nearby to honor the human sacrifices involved in the construction of the bridge. And legend has it, a general named Horio Yoshiharu became the feudal lord of the area during the era between 1596 and 1615. So that's not that long ago. It's not 380, you know what I mean? But
yeah, relatively, it's not that long ago.
In comparison to the other things. And when he took over the construction project for the bridge, they kept struggling with finding a solid foothold for the pillars that the bridge was actually going to sit on. And millions of stones would be tossed into the river to try and set it, you know what I mean? But each night it would get washed away. And eventually the bridge was finally built, only for the pillars to begin sinking soon after. Then a flood came and destroyed half of it. And they kept repairing the bridge and it kept getting damaged, and this kept happening until it was decided that a human sacrifice was needed to appease the river god. So a man named Gensuke was buried alive in the riverbed under the center pillar, and it said that the bridge was immovable for 300 years afterwards. So it must have worked or something, but he was the first man to cross the bridge wearing a hakama, which is like a traditional Japanese garb that you'd kind of see in feudal Japan. Have you ever watched Inuyasha?
Yeah.
So you know how the priestess, what's her name in Inuyasha?
I won't know any of the names, bro.
Okay, well, it's like the outfit that's like, well, kind of like what Inuyasha wears.
That's what I was picturing,
okay,
yeah.
So it's kind of like that. So
this guy walked across this bridge and they're like, bury him underneath it?
Well, so the criteria was that if you walked across the bridge in this, but you didn't have like this special thing to keep your clothes nice and straight and neat and proper, then they would, use you as a sacrifice.
So if you don't have enough starch in your clothes and you walk across a bridge, they're like, bury him now.
Yeah.
That's
so they're like, you're
crazy.
Chosen, thanks. The pillar he was buried under was named Gensuke Bashira, which probably just is his name and pillar or whatnot. And people believed this legend so intensely that when a new bridge was being built in the 1800s, thousands of country folk were afraid to come to town because of rumors that a new sacrifice would be needed.
Wow.
Which is so crazy. It's like, we've heard this, and we know it's been like 200 years, but
we still don't trust you, motherfuckers.
No. Then there's Matsue Castle, and that castle is said to be constructed over a human sacrifice buried under the stone walls. And there's no record of who it was, but it was supposedly a young maiden that loved to dance and is simply known as the Maiden of Matsue. And according to legend, after the castle was built, a law was passed forbidding dancing in the streets because the hill of the hill that the castle was on, it would move and the castle would shake from top to bottom.
So you weren't allowed to dance?
Like if you were a girl, like a maiden, you weren't allowed to dance in the streets.
So basically this is Footloose, but in feudal Japan.
Yep.
It's pretty fucking awesome.
They weren't allowed to kick off their Sunday shoes.
Tell me that Kevin Bacon time traveled back in time and rescued all these people.
Which is the one where it's like nobody puts baby in a corner?
That's not that movie.
Which
That's
one
Dirty
is that?
Dancing.
Oh, okay. Same thing. Whatever. Neil Patrick Harris is in that one. No, I'm joking because, How I Met Your Mother. Anyway, that's from How I Met Your Mother, right? Where he kind of does that dance scene, but instead of what's his name's face, it's Neil Patrick Harris's face on his body.
I don't remember this. I've watched this series like 3 straight times.
Oh my
All
gosh.
I remember is Crazy Stupid Love when like Emma Stone makes Ryan Gosling tell her, like, what's your move? Like, what's your big play? And he's like, I don't have a big play. And then she keeps annoying him. He's like, I work Dirty Dancing into the conversation. And she's like, why? He's like, because I can do the move. I can do the thing where I lift you up. I put the song on, I lift you up. It works every time. Like, that's what I remember. So I'm blanking on the How I Met Your Mother thing.
Okay. I don't remember. Maybe it was Family Guy. Beats me. I don't know. I just know I've seen this scene where it's that
It's been
dance
spoofed
move.
a million times, dude.
Anyway, okay. Enough of Dirty Dancing, apparently.
So they put the song on, the person runs, and they lift them up, and then they throw them underneath the bridge and pour concrete in over them.
Yep, that's their
Got
Dirty
it.
Dancing. Anyway.
And that person had the time of their life.
This is so stupid. Okay, I think it's pretty interesting what people will do to make things work in their favor. So I can't imagine being that person who's like, yo, the bridge isn't working out. Bodies. That's what we need.
Let the bodies hit the floor.
Oh my gosh.
What's so stupid is if you truly believe that human sacrifice was the way to go, shouldn't it be like an honor for you to sacrifice yourself and have a memorial built to you rather than just pick a random person to be like honored by the fact that you're about to murder them?
A source I read was that's kind of where the mentality of killing yourself for a cause comes from.
From human
Something
sacrifice.
like that, yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
I mean...
What is that called? Seppuku?
Seppuku?
I always get that and bukkake mixed up, and I'm always afraid I'm going to say the wrong one.
You know what's funny is like there's a ramen or there's a type of ramen or an udon or something like that that's called bukkake udon.
Are you supposed to throw it on your face before you eat it?
And the first time I ever saw that, I was like, what?
That's so gross.
Anyway, okay, so, all right, continuing on. That's a weird tangent. Anyway, something a little closer to home here in America would be Mound 72, located at Cahokia Mounds near Collinsville, Illinois. And it's the burial site of over 250 people, many of which were sacrifices. And Cahokia Mounds is a historic site of a pre-Columbian Native American city. And there used to be a ceremonial, like, type of wood henge there, kind of like Stonehenge, but it was made out of wood. And it was 412 feet or 126 meters in diameter and had 48 upright posts erected. So it was just a whole...
It's enormous.
Yeah, it's huge. You can't see my hands. I totally lifted my hands up in the air. What's the point? One of the posts even dated back to 950 CE, which is old.
CE,
which
as in Common Era.
Yeah.
Not before Common Era.
Yeah, but that's old.
Yeah, it's very old. It's the oldest thing you've referenced so far, I think.
What about AD?
What do you mean?
300 AD.
Well, why don't you call it CE? Why don't you have some consistency in your goddamn naming conventions, Robin?
Why don't you shut the fuck up? Yeah, I mean, that's still over 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And Mound 72 is labeled 72nd in a collection of mounds in the area. And it's only one of 6 ridgetop mounds in the area, which I think ridgetop mounds, when it says that, it's like flat on the top. You know what I mean? Ridge top.
That makes sense.
That's just my assuming. It's divided into 3 episodes, which is like time periods in which it was created. Not time periods necessarily, but stages in its creation. And the bodies placed within the mounds seem to have been placed very specifically for different reasons. And the first episode or stage includes what was called the beaded burial or birdman burial. And that was kind of important, I suppose, because it was buried in such a specific way. So he was face up and had a whole bunch of fancy stuff around him. They think that he was kind of like a head honcho of the area. And under him was another body that was face down. So they're like, this is really, really weird.
That is weird.
And near them was a whole bunch of other bodies. Super creepy. But then there was ramps. They made ramps that led to each different area of bodies. There was one particular mass burial that had 24 women in it. Then a layer went over that one. And then one...
when you say a layer, is it like dirt and rocks and grass?
Yeah, they layered over it. So
they basically just make the hill a hill again instead of like a burial site. And then they're like, all right, more bodies.
Time to stack more bodies. Yep. So one other burial site had 4 young men with their arms interlocked together. and missing their hands and skulls.
There used to be very intense Red Rover in Illinois. I don't know if you know this, but that's what happened to the losing group.
It's thought that these were to represent the cardinal directions of north, south, east, west. So never eat soggy waffles, y'all.
Okay, we gotta pause now, because I grew up, it was never eat soggy Wheaties or never eat sour
We didn't
watermelon.
eat Wheaties in Hawaii, man.
But
That's
yours
not-
was
just
soggy
not a-
waffles,
Yeah,
right?
never eat soggy
So,
waffles.
okay. I don't know what the hashtag is going to be for this, but you folks need to let us know what it was for you growing up to figure out, like, the compass rose, never eat soggy waffles, northeast, southwest type of thing. Let us know what yours was.
Like tag us on Twitter or Facebook
or on the
something.
Facebook, or on the Facebook group, I should say. I'm not 90. On the Facebook.
On the Twitters?
Let us know how you remembered it growing up, because I had two ways of doing it, and when I brought them up to Robin, she's like, "You're insane." I'm
It's
like,
soggy waffles.
I've never heard soggy waffles before, but there's a bunch of them
what's
out
worse,
there.
sour watermelon?
What?
I've never heard of that.
Well, I'm sorry, man. Like, I grew up in Northwest Indiana, and that's how we did it. Soggy. I hate you. I was about to say soggy waffles.
I've never heard of sour watermelon. I've never had one. I've always had good watermelon.
I don't eat watermelon, so I wouldn't know.
So yeah, let us know what you were taught growing up, because obviously there's a whole bunch of different ways.
Tell us how you construct your burial mounds as well.
Yeah. So next to these young men were another 53 women.
Oh my God.
That were aged between 15 to 30, and they were strangled and then arranged in neat rows. So they weren't just tossed in this time. They were arranged in there.
And they were murdered this time, like, not just placed there. And, like, you didn't have details of how the other ones died. These ladies were, strangled to death.
Yep. These women are concluded by researchers to have come from a lower caste. So they were not rich or anything. They were much poorer than the rest of the ones that were in there. And I just think that's really odd. Those were then covered, and then even more mass graves. So the next grave found is what archaeologists dub Mound 72 sub 3. And this is the most violent one, having contained 39 men and women that were violently killed. A pit was dug and lined with white sand, and then victims were killed and thrown into the pit. And some were incompletely decapitated, so that means, like, they were just
Nearly
murdered.
headless?
Yeah.
How does one be nearly headless?
Quick murder, and then chucked into a hole. That's how.
Wow.
Some had fractured skulls and jawbones, so it was like a huge battle, like a huge war or something like that, and then the bodies were just chucked in there. And then evidence even showed that some of these were buried alive, with some of the individuals having looked like they were trying to dig out of the sand, like their hands were up trying to dig out of it. It's super weird.
It's horrific, dude. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how they find evidence of that aside from having their hands reaching out, like, between other bodies, but
Yeah.
good Lord, what a way to go.
This burial was made 100 years after the Woodhenge Circle was originally constructed. So there has to be a reason why they keep putting bodies into this circle. You know what I mean? And the amount of bodies in this mound calculate to approximately 272. Researchers believe that this includes a long line of prominent figures from the area, as well as their retainers and sacrifices. They believe maybe 62% of them were sacrifices because of evidence of ritual execution based on the way they were buried, and other things that they found with them lead them to think that 62% were sacrifices.
It's a very specific percentage.
Yeah.
What's the other 38%? It was just like they died and they put them there?
Battle victims, maybe, or like that one guy that they just found with all his stuff around him, like it's just a regular burial, maybe, or
Right
something
on.
like that. And then on to the big honchos when it comes to human sacrifice, the ancient Aztecs.
Yeah, they were kind of the kings.
Yeah. So
They had a basketball game, right? Are you going to cover that?
We'll get there, because there's a game, but you can cover the basketball game when we get to that point. Because maybe it was the Mayans. Who knows? I don't know the difference.
I can't remember which. I thought it was the Aztecs.
Okay, we'll get there. Anyway,
Okay. I'll let you lead us there.
The Aztecs definitely weren't the first in the area to practice human sacrifice, and they weren't the last either, as Mayans and Toltecs did continue the practice, but they took it to a level that was just legendary. Like, they were legendary when it comes to human sacrifices. When you think human sacrifice, you think Aztec, like huge monuments.
The first place my brain goes is the Aztecs.
It's rumored / theorized that hundreds, if not thousands, were sacrificed each year at Aztec religious sites. And if you calculate that, that's multiple people every day, not taking any holidays off of murder.
That's hilarious. Full-time executioner. What a shitty job.
It's also thought that this was a way to ward off any visitors. So, like, intimidation factor, kind of like, if you show up, we're gonna kill you. That's just what we do.
We kill our own. What do you think we'll do to you?
So sacrificing these humans were made out to be some type of repayment to the gods for having created the world and the sun. There's a legend of the gods Quetzalcoatl, and Tezcatlipoca. It's so hard to say, but hopefully I got it right.
You threw out like 90 Japanese words earlier, so don't get tripped on the Aztec stuff now, okay?
So they ripped a mythical reptilian monster apart and used the pieces to create different aspects of the universe. So the earth, the sun, different parts of the world, things like that. And to appease this reptile called Kepactli, the gods promised her human hearts and blood. Other views of the same thing are that the sacrifices are compensation to the gods for their committing the crime, which I think is kind of cool. Everyone,
it's like a penance by murder.
There's even yet another story where Quetzalcoatl stole bones from the underworld and then made the first humans with them. So humans were the necessary sacrifice to apologize. Don't create us then. Jeez.
I didn't ask to be born.
Meat was burned and blood poured over statues of deities in order for gods to partake of it directly. So it's like way to streamline from earth to the heavens.
Can you imagine, like, if societies early on weren't thinking this crazy shit and they're like, how about we all just chill out and like become really good, like, I don't know, astronomers and not murder each other?
The Mayans were kind of cool because they were really smart.
Yeah, they were.
But they still did it.
I know. Imagine all the other stuff they would have done.
We'll cover them later.
Imagine all the other stuff they would have done had they not just always committed human sacrifices. But maybe that's why they were so smart.
So what's creepy is they even perform things like bloodletting and self-harm as a way to offer to the gods. It's really creepy that they would do that, but it is better than killing people, I suppose. You know what I mean?
I guess, yeah. Still not great.
It's obviously not the worst part of it all, but it is an odd thing to do. The human sacrifices were selected from warriors that they held captive. Sometimes war was a necessary thing for them to procure even more sacrifices. And this was what they called, quote unquote, flowery war. So they would stop as soon as they were happy with how many captives that they got, which is so over the top. I mean, come on. The best fighters or the best looking ones were considered the best candidates. So fugly yourself up if you don't want to get sacrificed,
wow.
I guess. It's so messed up, dude, this whole process. Being sacrificed was for those that were worthy, having it be like a high honor, as it was a direct line to the gods if you were sacrificed to them, you know? So stupid. Then if this is what you believe in, you're messed up, but okay.
If you're an Aztec and you're listening to this, like, this chick doesn't know what she's talking about as you're like cutting your own heart out, like, please don't, just stop.
Then there are the sacrificial ball games. So the captain of the losing team, or even the whole team, would be sacrificed. And in this case, often to the rain god, rituals being held on sacred mountains. Of course, it has to be on a sacred mountain.
This is like pro-level status
and
here.
then what's super messed up is that they thought the tears of the child victims would directly lead to rain. Like, what?
I am just so flabbergasted by so much of this.
So what is this basketball you
So they had a game that was literally like, it had a hoop, like a rim, and they would play essentially what was basketball without dribbling. They couldn't dribble because it wasn't an inflated ball. It was a human head that they would shoot into this thing, and whichever team lost would be sacrificed.
And you sure it's not soccer?
I'm pretty sure, yeah, because it wasn't like a goal like that. It was like a hoop, like basketball. So it's just like, I remember learning about it when I was young, and I was like, is this where basketball came from? Because that's pretty messed up.
So slaves were another category of sacrifice that would be accompanying their ruler in death, or were given as an offering by tradesmen to ensure prosperity in their business. So they just gave them up thinking, I need money. I hope I'm successful this year. Please take this slave of mine and sacrifice them. So I hope that I can do better. You know what I mean? How messed up is that?
It's like their human being that they own is an offering to a collection plate of death.
So crazy.
Yeah, it's horrific. It's just like horrifying in every way.
That's why the Aztecs warred a lot. That's why they battled so much, and they just wanted to collect more captives and make sure they had enough sacrifices to make up for what they had for the earth, for the sun.
The earth.
I said
Welcome
earth.
to Earth. Sorry, I've been thinking about Independence Day all day today. I know you haven't seen it. We'll have to remedy that at some point in the near future.
Okay. Then there were those that were specifically chosen to represent the gods. So they'd be treated like royalty for a whole year, like they would be given anything they could ever possibly want before they were ultimately sacrificed. And they were...
Do you remember the show? I'm sorry to bust in again. Do you remember the show Sliders? Like Jerry O'Connell, I forget what his name is, the guy that played Gimli in The Lord of the Rings. It was on Fox. It was essentially Quantum Leap for the 1990s. And like they would go to world to world to world to world through like these parallel, like, or these wormholes. And there's a world they wound up in where it's like they win the lottery when they get there. And they're super excited. And the lottery lasts for a year. And like when the year is up, they get killed. And they're like, they start picking up on the fact that like, the people who are at the end of their lottery year are about to die, and they're like, oh, we need to get the F out of here.
Wow.
So now it's nice to know where that came from.
I used to read these books. There was a book that I read that did have an Aztec god in it, but it was about these, I feel like they were teenagers. I never finished the book, okay? Don't shame me. But they were these teenagers, and they were in a modern world. But when they went to sleep, they'd wake up in this Aztec era type world, and they had to do a whole bunch of stuff. I don't know.
If they went back to sleep, would they wake up back in like the normal world?
Yeah.
Was it like exchanging?
Yes. So you would go to sleep, wake up in a different place, go to sleep, wake up in a different... It was very strange. But I wish I knew what the title was because I'd read it. I would totally finish that book now that I'm older.
I'm sure if you did enough Googling, you could probably find it.
If you guys know what I'm talking about, let me know. So these people were treated as gods on Earth, and there was one particular god called Zipe Totec. That's probably not how you say it, but the person that portrayed them, that would represent them for the year, would then be skinned at the end of the festival to honor, quote unquote, the flayed one, which is so messed up.
Yeah, that's really, really messed up.
Now for the more gruesome details.
Oh, yeah, because these have been great so far.
So rituals were performed on those big pyramids. I'm sure some of you have seen before that when you think of Aztec, you think of those big pyramids with the stairs on them. The sacrifice would be stretched out over a special stone. Then their chest would be cut open and their heart removed using obsidian, aka dragon glass, or a flint knife. And the heart would be placed in a stone vessel or an effigy of some sort, and it would be burnt to sacrifice to the god. Or other times they'd just be decapitated and dismembered. There are even recorded depictions of decapitated bodies being flung down the steps of the pyramids, which is so much. And then there's the gladiatorial combat. So it's not much of combat, but there'd be a contest where you'd be put against a whole group of warriors, and the victim obviously would not survive and would have no chance of survival because they'd be tied to a stone, and their weapon was a feathered club, while everyone else had sharp obsidian swords.
Wow. These
people were absolutely ruthless. They're just thinking, how can we murder this person in the most spectacular way possible? You could you could also choose to be thrown into a fire repeatedly and then have your heart ripped out. That's kind of cool too. Or any of the other million options of how to sacrifice.
This is one of those moments where I'm like really, really happy I was born in the era that I was born.
Yeah.
Where human sacrifices like this aren't just like a common day-to-day thing.
Right. After the sacrifice, the heads of the victims would be displayed on racks. And this is totally depicted because there are carvings, like there are decorations of this type of thing where it's shelves with heads on them. It's crazy. Gross fact, some of the flesh on the bodies were eaten by priests conducting the sacrifice on occasion.
Someone's listening to this on their lunch break and they're just putting down their food like, never mind.
I just imagine Daenerys when she's eating the heart.
I thought of that earlier when the heart was getting taken out, not this flesh-eating part.
So obviously the Aztecs were pretty messed up, but there are lots of other cultures that sacrificed, and we'll definitely just have to cover more of them later. But yeah, just an intro into human sacrifice.
Wow. What's shocking is I feel like you just got started and it was like 35 minutes long. It's a lot of human sacrifice. So good shit, Robin. That's some good stuff.
Thanks.
I can't wait to find out about more cultures that sacrificed humans in horrific ways. Yeah, that's probably more on the scary end than the ish end.
Yeah.
So good stuff. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to my topic for this episode. And like I mentioned earlier, this week I almost actually veered off track. But I decided that I was going to stick to it because I've been saying for a few weeks now that I really wanted to cover this. And by gum, I'm going to do it.
By gum.
And I'm not sure how this topic is going to work because it is going to be different than the topics that I normally do. But hey, we're going to get through it. And so, folks, I present to you EVP.
I'm kind of scared to hear the actual EVP.
One of them's not bad. And then one of them I was listening to and I was like, all right, this one's kind of creepy. But am I just hearing the things that I, think are being said here? But we're going to get to it. So some of you might be excited about this topic because, you listen to a podcast called Scary-ish and, this is a pretty famous thing. But some of you might actually be asking, what is EVP? And it stands for Electronic Voice Phenomenon. It stands for a bunch of stuff if you Google it, like Executive Vice President's what I think of when I think of EVP. But we're going to not be in the Executive Vice President realm for like the next 30 minutes. It's basically when you take a recording, whether it's video or audio, and if it is video, it'd have to have audio included. And when you play it back, like if you turn the volume way up in the white noise, you can hear something that resembles a voice. And these voices are thought to be spirits attempting to communicate, or just like bullshitting with each other. And we're just eavesdropping.
Is it possible that it's just someone whispering?
Well, that's the thing, and I'm going to cover that too. Like the fact that EVP. Okay, I'll get to it. So. One thing you find a lot too when you're digging into EVPs, they talk about the spirits being discarnate spirits, which basically means they're disembodied, like they're like entities that just don't have a home, and that's why you can hear them just like chattering away. There are a lot of documented cases where folks were present to like validate the authenticity, but despite that, like I'm still very skeptical. Like first and foremost, the reason I haven't covered EVPs yet is because even though a lot of places claim each thing that they have to post up is 100% legit, it can very easily be faked. It could be total bullshit. So obviously you're going to want to take everything that we're going to go over here with a grain of salt. And a simple way to tell whether or not a thing is real or fake when it comes to EVPs is to just go record them yourself. Go someplace creepy and like go and take some recording equipment if you have it. I really don't want to do that.
I like those static boxes, the ones that go through the different radio channels. So
I was researching those too. It's specifically taking like a tiny clip of each radio channel and like mixing it with static to like create what sounds like a sentence. And like I didn't really dig too much into that because it's not exactly EVP. But those came out in like the late to early 2000s, which I guess would be the mid 2000s, which is hilarious. But there's some other stuff that came out before that are similar to it that we're going to cover. So all you really need to do this is a device that can record, the ability to play it back, and turn up the volume so you can listen to the white noise.
So do you think any of these podcasts have any EVPs?
I don't know, but I'm not going to listen back. However, this one might. So, because we're going to do some experiments. I'm really excited about this. I got some stuff for us. So, the better audio equipment that you have, the better chance you have at capturing some type of audio. So, for an example, I figured we have some pretty good equipment that we record with, thanks to our wonderful folks who have donated to us. So before we started, when I was doing the research, I decided that I was just going to record some white noise audio and then crank it up and play it back so that we can listen to it right now and see if it picked up anything. So here we go.
No way.
Trying to reach you about your vehicle's extended warranty.
You're so stupid.
It's terrifying stuff, though, right? Like, if that stuff persists beyond the grave, like, I don't know what the hell we're all going to do. But I think this is...
Something about your expired warranty?
It's like that stupid voicemail that you always get where it's like, we're trying to reach you for your vehicle's extended warranty. Robin, like, despite the fact that this was clearly a setup for a joke, had to put her fingers in her ears because she's too afraid to listen to these things, which is going to make our later activities a bit more difficult. But, like, I'm pointing out, like, this stuff is very easily faked. You know what I mean? Like, any asshole with literally 90 free seconds can create something that sounds creepy, which is how long it took me to make that. And, like, if I wasn't here to tell you that this is 100% fake, there might be someone out there who decided to think it was real, and if they're listening to it through, like, different audio, they might say like, well, I heard something different. So there's that. So keep that in mind. The second reason I have not covered this topic is kind of similar, but a little bit different. We at Scary-ish do not have any EVPs. You know what I mean? So I hesitate to use someone else's stuff. But that said, even though it's stuff we can't vouch for, I went and listened to a lot of these things tonight. So take anything that we do play with a grain of salt. We're going to give credit for all the EVPs we played to the people who recorded them. But we're going to play two in particular. And I'm kind of excited about it, actually, as long as Robin doesn't put her fingers in her ears and ruin the whole thing. As a side note, I will not be using anything from Zach Bagels or his crew. I'd prefer to avoid any sort of entanglements with him whatsoever.
Well, I mean, my sister saw them this weekend at San Diego Comic-Con.
Yes, she did. She has a t-shirt and everything. Like, when she put it on, I tried to set it on fire, but she's too quick. So, a quick recap about when this got really popular, when EVP became a thing. Shocker, it was the same time as the spiritualist movement. And the same folks who had this massive boner for using Ouija boards and spirit boards to bother dead people who just wanted to get some goddamn peace and quiet got really into EVPs as well. And, they bother the dead and, the demons who were just waiting for someone to hit them up, who were just super psyched when people got this stuff.
Wow.
So it wasn't just spiritualists, though. Thomas Edison, who is straight up credited with inventing sound recording, was actually asked about it. Sound recording in general being used to commune with spirits. And he said, and I quote, "No, idiot."
No way.
No, he didn't say that, but it would have been hilarious. Obviously, I'm just kidding. Here is what he actually stated, quote, "If our personality survives, then it is strictly logical or scientific to assume that it retains memory, intellect, other faculties, and knowledge that we acquire on this earth. Therefore, if we can evolve an instrument so delicate as to be affected by our personality as it survives in the next life, such an instrument, when made available, ought to record something." So he's theorizing that your consciousness survives after your body expires, and if we can create something that can actually pick up your consciousness, then you should be able to actually record you once you're dead. So it's very interesting because there's a theory that goes along with EVPs later on that I'm going to get to that I really think ties into what Edison was saying when this whole thing got started. What's that face for?
I'm just thinking about Wild Wild West when they use the...
Never seen it.
What?
You do this every time. I've never seen it.
I'm so mind blown. Oh, and I can't talk to you about any... Oh, God. Continue on.
Okay. So there are, according to the folks that research EVPs, 3 classes of EVP. Class A, which is clear and understandable. Class B, which is fairly loud and clear, possibly audible without headphones. And Class C, very soft and indecipherable. As a side note, most of the EVPs I listen to, and I think most of the EVPs out there are Class C, okay. Where it's like you don't really know what they're saying. Now, skeptics like myself, but I'm being pretty open-minded about this topic, they typically equate EVP to a phenomenon how you see shapes in clouds, where you look up, you see something that vaguely resembles a dinosaur or a penis, and you're like, oh look, a Tyrannosaurus and a dong. You kind of see what your brain gravitates towards, and it's the same thing. You kind of hear what words you think might be being said versus actually hearing the sounds for what they are. And one interesting piece of evidence that I found that has been used in experiments to try and disprove EVP as an actual phenomenon is pretty obvious. You record something or take a sample of a supposed EVP, even something that's supposed to be a real EVP, and you get a listener who does not know what they're about to hear. You suggest words that don't match the words that the sample supposedly is about, and then they usually come back and report back that they heard what you told them they would hear versus hearing what the sample supposedly says.
I can understand that.
Because you're really influencing things, you know?
When you watch Ghost Adventures, they say, doesn't that sound like this?
Yeah.
And everyone's like, oh, yeah, that
does. I'm 6 lines away from my Ghost Adventures reference, too. So okay. You're, right on track with me here. Another fun way people have been tricked is they tell them the same phrase. They say hey, this is the phrase that the audio is about to say, and they play it for them, and the subjects say, I totally heard that, except that they both, there's going to be 2 subjects in this case for the experiment, they both speak completely different languages. So they both hear the same phrase, but the mouth sounds, depending on which language you speak, are entirely different, and they always hear it in their native tongue. So very interesting studies that have been done to try and disprove this stuff. That said, we're going to listen to some samples here, and it's some creepy fucking shit. Because you have to remember, EVPs is essentially, you are recording quietness. You're recording the absence of sound and then cranking up the volume, and you hear things, you know? And when you listen to something that is not silence like you should be hearing, you try and figure out what is actually being said. So something to keep in mind as we do this. Now, there's a really great website you can go to if you want to do some of these experiments in your free time or like when you're at work, like because who wants to do work when you're at work? And it's ASSAP.ac.uk because it's based out of the UK. You can check it out. What's really cool is they have multiple audio samples where you can listen and they do not tell you what you're supposed to be hearing. Then afterwards, there's a link you can click that takes you to what everyone assumes or thinks they hear, and you can see if you match up with what you thought you heard. So it's kind of fun, and we're going to do some of that. Not with that particular website stuff, but with some other ones that I found. Before we get to it, I just want to do a quick overview of EVP, like the history of it. And I'll give you a quick recap on it because I don't want to get too deep into this. I'm not going to go super in depth. I just want to give you an overview of some of the more notable things that have happened with EVP. So there was a Swedish guy named Konstantin Raudiv. I think I'm saying his last name right. And he was super into EVP. He, in fact, recorded 100,000 samples and asked other people to verify what he thought he heard on them. Of course, he wound up writing a bunch of books. It came out in 1968 in a different language. And there are samples of the EVPs that he recorded that were like supposed to be the clearest that came out along with the book for folks to listen to.
Ooh.
It came out, I think, 70 or 71 when it got transferred to English, or translated, I should say, to English. And I found some of the audio. You can totally find it if you go look for it. However, the recordings are them, like him and some of his assistants, like prepping you for what you're about to hear. So again, telling you what you're going to hear versus playing it. And then talking
and letting
about,
you think about
yeah, and I feel like that's just reverse. So I'm like, I'm not using that stuff. That said, there's a whole thing about EVP when it comes to the skeptics is that it's mostly supposedly just white noise, or like you said, background conversation being picked up from somewhere else. Like you're just like in a quiet room, but because you have this microphone, it's picking up other things that are actually being said.
We pick up cars from outside.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
it can happen, you know, and like people just extrapolate what they want to hear, or they hear something creepy specifically. And an example is Ghost Adventures. You know, you hear a floorboard creak, and it's like, did it just say kill Zach? Like, that's the perfect example of, like, what skeptics think EVP actually is. So, moving on to, like, this whole recap of the thing, there was this guy named William O'Neill, and he made a recorder called the Spiricom, which is, like, spirit communicator, in 1980, and he told people he was having full-blown conversations with the dead. Like, I'm not just kidding. Like, he held a press conference on April 6th, 1982.
Recent.
To tell the world he was having conversations with dead people. Then he told researchers the specifications for his device so they could build it and try it out for themselves, which, of course, they did. And they were like, yo, dog, we're not picking up anything with this thing. Are you sure the specs are right? And he never really said much back to these folks about their inability to get things to work. However, he had a business partner at some point that said that old Willie O'Neill had, quote, mediumistic abilities, and that's what made his attempts work with this device.
So he didn't really actually need anything at all.
It's like, okay, so you made this thing that everyone says is BS, and then your business partner comes out, it's like, well, he's a medium-ish, so that's why it worked for him. It's like, okay, so then it's not going to work for, like, you know, normal people. And this is why I have trust issues with this sort of thing. I just wanted you folks to know.
Yeah.
So that's the brief background on EVP that I really wanted to hit on. The 100,000 audio samples that one guy took are fascinating if you want to go check them out. So what are we going to cover together? Well, I thought we'd start by going to one of the locations that I've covered previously on the show, the Hellfire Club. I don't know if you remember the Hellfire Club, but what I covered was about the real, like, haunted clubhouse in Ireland. Crazy shit happened there. Basically, a bunch of rich people decided they were going to thumb their nose at traditional religion and start a club where they could be, like, super into black masses and animal sacrifices and eventually human sacrifices, which
all
is
them
funny.
Orgies.
Because it's like you talked about human sacrifices. And there were murders between members. Apparently, the devil showed up to play cards one night. There were fires. There's a bunch of crazy shit that happened. But if you remember from that episode, the club actually started in England and just got picked up by a bunch of other places. So there was also clubs based in England, and they didn't have like the actual like clubhouse that they have in Ireland. They had caves, and they're called the Hellfire Caves. and they're in Buckinghamshire, which just sounds like a bunch of words combined. Like someone
where
was
the
making
hobbits
up the
live?
word. No, it's where the Queen Hobbit lives, because Buckingham Palace.
Oh, that's
plus
funny.
the
That's a
Shire.
good one.
Thank you. So a group of ladies over there, and they have a website called evp-voices.info. And I suggest you go check it out because I'm going to play one of their audio clips. They traveled to the Hellfire Caves, which are like caves underneath this town, which are dark and dingy and old and gross. And they set up audio recording equipment, and they recorded a bunch of audio, and they're asking a bunch of questions. And these caves where like black masses and sacrifices are known to have taken place. So I'm going to play a single recording they took in these caves. And they
I'm
vouch
scared.
They vouch that this has not been doctored in any way aside from the audio being raised so you can hear like the white noise a little bit better. I'm going to run this twice for you folks listening. It is 7 seconds long. So I'm going to run it for anyone who's listening to the podcast. So this is basically directed at everyone but Robin. It's going to run. There's going to be a brief period of silence. Then it's going to run again. And I put this one as Class C because it is difficult to make out. I want you to listen with your, I don't care if it's a skeptical ear or if it's like a true believer ear, but actually think of what you think the second half of this audio states, because it's like someone's asking, like, give us a message, and then it's supposed to be silence, and then it's amplified, and you can hear something. So we're going to listen to it together. Then I'm going to ask you what you think you hear, Robin. And everyone at home, think of what you think you hear, and I'll tell you what they state it's saying. All right? Is everyone ready? All right, here we go.
I'd like to invite the spirits of this cave forward, please, to leave a message. I'd like to invite the spirits of this cave forward, please, to leave a message.
I didn't even get anything that, like, it was supposed to say.
When I first listened to this, I was like, I don't know what this thing is trying to say. So I played it a million times, and then I read like what the title, because I was like trying to do the thing where like you hide what it's supposed to say.
Yeah.
And I was just clicking audio files. And then when I read it, I was like, you know what? I think I can kind of hear that. I'm going to play it again for us, okay?
I don't get it.
But you hear something, right?
Yeah, I mean, I hear something, but it could be like someone talking from the other side of the room.
It could totally be fake. So what we're doing right now with our grain of salt is trusting these ladies that they recorded silence in these terrifying caves. They went home, they listened to all the questions that they asked and all the prompts that they made, and they heard this noise after they asked a question.
I totally forgot that it was supposed to be a recording in a cave because I thought it was her answering machine.
I know, it does sound like, please leave a message.
message.
It's like, the fat man walks the clouds.
Is that what it said?
No, it's not what it said. That's funny. Okay, so I don't know what those of you at home or in your car or at work thought this said, but I will now reveal it. And because Robin likes to read my scripts while I go along sometimes, I put all the letters in white on white background.
You're an ass.
So she wouldn't see it. So it's supposed to say, yes, we are everywhere. You brought us together.
How do you even get that from that?
That's what the audio clip is like titled once you like look into it. So I definitely didn't hear that when I listened to it the first time, but after I read it and like listened to it again, I kind of can pick it out, especially the together part, like brought us together near the end. In fact, I'll play it again one more time for you folks that are listening at home so you can see if you can pick out, yes, we are everywhere. You brought us together. Robin and I are also going to listen to it one more time, remembering those are the words we're supposed to be hearing now that we heard it.
I'd like to invite the spirits of this cave forward, please, to leave a message.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really big stretch.
It is, but here's the thing, like, when you do EVP recordings and you find white noise when there should be the absence of any sound, it's like when you're doing a bad lip reading. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're like, what can this sound like? Except you don't...
a fish.
Funyuns! But, like, you don't have the lips to go along with it. You just have, like, these mouth sounds, and they're usually very high-pitched. So that's what they came up with. They got home, they heard this sound. I'm sure they sat down and listened to this a million times, and that's what they came up with. And I will say, I picked this one because it's probably the creepiest of all the stuff they have on there, because they really just go with whatever the words sound like to them. So it's like, there's one about like, I like the bakery, or something like super benign, where it doesn't sound like evil or dark.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't hear that before I listen to it anyways, but I'm going to pick the one that has the creepier words and is a little bit longer.
Okay.
So that's the first one. Again, I call it a Class C. And shout out to these ladies who went to this like super creepy place, because regardless of whether or not you think like that is real, like that's still a really creepy place to go during the day. And we're going to move on. I'm going to do one more. And this one is going to be longer. And I'm only going to play it one time. And if you would like to listen to it multiple times, you're welcome to hit up your rewind button on your podcast. And this one comes from a group called the Central New York Ghost Hunters. And I know some of you, when I say that, are like, I've heard this one, because it's one of the most famous EVPs that's ever been recorded.
Really?
So these folks are based out of Syracuse, New York. They're a large group that's like paranormal investigators. They had a hotel in upstate New York contact them in 2007, I believe it was, and request that they come out to investigate some paranormal shit happening in this hotel. The first thing about this story, when I was reading it, that makes me feel it's more credible than most of the other stuff I did not include in the podcast, is the fact that the hotel, when they reached out, when they acquired their services, made sure that their identity would be kept confidential, and to this day, 12 years later, it has not leaked. There are suspected hotels that it might be, but it straight up has not been leaked. Like, they don't want the publicity for being a haunted hotel. They brought people in because they're like, creepy stuff is happening to us and our staff, and we'd like someone to come and investigate it and just let us know if we're crazy or what the case is. Some facts on the hotel they were able to release is that it's over 100 years old. It was built in the late 1800s, and the owners state that the hotel had some shady stuff happen, some nefarious activity on the grounds, and that's where they think that this paranormal activity came from.
Okay.
So the group went to the hotel and set up microphones in various supposedly empty locations. And again, it's like,
It's a hotel.
Maybe you're just recording. That's the thing, though. There's like a whole floor that's empty. And like they had them
But it
go to
could
these
be,
floors
like-
they don't book people at because there's so much stuff. And it could be sound carrying. Don't get
Right.
me wrong. But like they said and they vouched, and there was a bunch of people here for this that were supposed to be confirming stuff. That's why this one is so well known, because they're like, they had all these people there to confirm there was no sound going on aside from what I'm about to tell you. So they stayed the night. They all said it was super creepy. They heard footsteps. They heard whispers in their rooms. Bunch of fucking creepy shit. And they also recorded during the day. 2 members of the crew were in a staircase of the hotel in a spot that had no one in it. And they heard footsteps and conversation on the floor above them. The problem being, the floor above them was completely empty, and it was like bereft of all people when they searched it. So they went back to the staircase. They're like, fuck it. And they set up their equipment and they started recording. It was like 3 p.m. in the afternoon. So I'm going to play you a piece of the audio they recorded, because the full clip is 11 minutes long. If you want to Google this group, by all means, Central New York Ghost Hunters, you can find the full thing if you want to listen to it. I'm only going to play you from the 90-second mark to the 150-second mark. So 1.5 to 2 minutes for a full minute of audio. I picked this time frame because, to be quite honest, the first minute is it has like a lot of interference. They state that they set the microphone down and just recorded for 12 minutes, okay? And like the first minute, it sounds like someone's moving the microphone, like the audio completely goes dead at some point. And they're like, that didn't happen. Like, it showed like an audio sample being recorded until it just stopped. No one touched the microphone. No one moved it. I'm only going to play this once. You don't have to worry about that sort of feedback. 30 seconds in, it does get louder. I will warn you that. I will control the volume on my end. But if you're like, I'm going to crank this shit to see what I can hear, I warn you now that the audio will fluctuate at 30 seconds, okay? So now you know all that stuff. Before we turn it on, it is stated that despite the audio not being in perfect condition, they did amplify it and clean out some of the noise. This one's probably more like a Class A, because you can hear stuff without a bunch of distortion in the background. If you don't want to listen to this, if you're a scaredy cat like Robin, jump ahead a minute in the podcast as soon as like we say we're about to play it.
I'm scared.
We're going to play it. Don't be scared. Don't be a wimp. We're going to be okay. Here we go.
I just heard a whole bunch of noise. It was just really noisy.
It sounds like the audio at like a construction site almost.
Yes.
If I didn't
But then
see...
there was like a screaming woman at some point.
I didn't see all this stuff vouching for this, I'd be like, this one's just fake. Someone recorded like a hallway in a noisy apartment or a noisy hotel.
Sounds like construction.
But they are like adamant that this is legit, where they're like, we hear voices coming from upstairs. Like, it sounds like conversations. It sounds like a few women talking. It sounds like a man yelling and arguing. And now I can tell you a few things about what they've analyzed this to. They think that it is being said. Okay, so there's 12 minutes of audio. You can find a transcript where they think they know all the things that are being said here. The only thing I picked out of this is I thought I heard someone say "get out" near the end of it. So the first things that are being said, apparently, according to these folks, is "I'll miss you," all these questions, "you know me," "get off me."
I thought I heard that.
What the hell? And then, like, that's when the ruckus happens, where it sounds like people are fighting or like things are being moved around.
I thought I heard a woman screaming for sure.
Yeah. And then in the noisy bits, it's supposed to be, okay, let's start off with your head. What is it you want, motherfucker? And don't let him have a go at you. And I'm like, I don't hear any of that shit. But I thought I heard at the end, "get out." And I will say, like, as much as it does sound like a conversation or stuff moving around or stuff tapping in the background, there are those like wobbly points, if you know what I'm talking about, like the really gruff, like that shit creeps me out. I have goosebumps just thinking about what I just listened to, because like that stuff sounds scary. And I'm like, okay, well, there's this transcript of people who've listened to this thing a million times. Like, I should go back and listen to those specific parts that sound like a demon talking and see what it says. And I literally was like, you know what? I'm not going to fucking do that. Like, I've listened to this shit enough tonight. I will let the listeners listen to it and let us know what they think is being said there. And because I really do think that that is some creepy shit, I'm going to lighten us out. I'm going to lighten us up before, like, I let us out of this thing. So, now that the nature of EVPs is pretty much, like, exposed, where it's, like, pretty much not great audio that you have to listen to and try and pick out a voice or word or phrase, I think we all kind of know that this isn't like the most appealing thing to put on an audio medium.
Right, yeah.
So that's why I only went with 2. And maybe it's all nothing. It's all just ambient noise and a bunch of shit it's picking up that's just other people. But there is one theory that I referenced earlier with Edison that I found rather interesting on how EVPs are recorded. And it isn't recording a dead or disembodied spirit. It's actually recording the thoughts of the individual attempting to record something. And it's basically a rudimentary form of telepathy, where if you're concentrating hard enough on something, it shows up in your audio, albeit extremely quiet and buried in the white noise.
Yeah.
And they've even conducted experiments on this theory. And for those of you that want to try this, you get some people together. Each person picks like a secret word or a code word or a phrase. They write it down so only they can see it, and they seal it in an envelope. Then you pick like a time range, like 9 to 10 p.m. or something, like usually 30 minutes to an hour. During that time, when the time frame starts, you hit record. You're all around a bunch of microphones, and you don't say anything. You just concentrate really hard on your word or your phrase. Then you check the audio when the hour is up, and you see if any words pop up in the EVP. And when you hear something out of the ordinary, you raise the volume, and as a group, you try and figure out what that word is. And if you hear it and it sounds like your word, you don't say what your word is. You don't say, like, does it sound like this to you guys? Like, you just let other people come to the conclusion, and anything that you think you might hear, you write down. Once you're done with all your audio, you open up your envelopes and see if any of those words wound up on your audio track. It's crazy, but it's pretty straightforward.
Because they think it's your consciousness.
Yeah,
putting the
which
sound
is
out
hilarious there. Because when people asked Edison about this, he's like, well, if your consciousness survives, like, you're going to retain all your knowledge. And if there's a device sensitive enough to record your consciousness while you're alive, it should record it while you're dead. And I'm like, well, if they can actually prove this theory is correct, which they never will, but if they could actually prove this theory is something, then it stands to reason that EVP might actually be a thing.
Think about your consciousness living on some type of electrical wave That is
So
just
Transcendence
out
with
there.
Johnny Depp, where he
Oh,
just becomes
Malanta.
he becomes AI. I haven't seen that movie.
I
heard
haven't
it.
seen it either.
Heard it was very bad. So that
I hear he
said,
turns evil.
what's that?
I think he turns evil in it, right?
Yeah,
Or
he's
something
like the bad
that.
guy. So that said, in the spirit of this, Robin and I are going to write down code words.
No, we're not.
Yes, we are, because why not? And we're going to take like 10, 15 seconds of dead air and just concentrate on our words or our phrases or whatever, and we'll see what pops up in
Okay.
the audio.
Okay.
So I'm going to grab a piece of paper.
Oh, we're actually writing it down?
Well, yeah, we're going to make this official so you don't
Why
just
can't
make
I
up
just
like...
think it in my head really hard?
Because you need to write it down. Do you not understand the point of the experiment? That way, if you're like, yeah, I said potato salad, but the entire time you were thinking boner garage, like, we'll know you're lying.
I'm not going to lie.
And now everyone knows what my word was going to be, which is boner garage. God damn it.
What was it?
That's not how this works. You did not pay attention to this whole thing. So through the magic of editing, this is going to sound really awesome to you folks. That said, what's going to happen from our end, we're going to do the experiment. We're not going to open these until I review the audio when we're done recording, and then we'll see what's in there. So
right.
We're going to go ahead, remember your word. We're going to go ahead and take 15 seconds of dead air to see if we can transfer our thoughts onto our recording, and we'll see what's going to happen. So starting now.
Seriously though, like this is the last time we're gonna call you about your vehicle's extended warranty. Is this a courtesy call? I'm fading out again,
Okay, you good?
Yep.
You feel good about that?
Yep.
Well, keep your thing, because you don't want to lose it, because after this, when I'm doing the editing, I'm going to be very excited to get to this point and listen to this cranked the fuck up. But, you know, the listeners, they'll have the audio just rise to the point where it's, you know, tolerable to hear, and we'll see if our words match up. I'm going to splice in what our words were at this very moment, which is going to be post-production stuff. Our words were Bruce Willis for me and Ding-a-ling for Robin. But yeah, you can try that out. If you have anything that you can record with, I think it's super fun. And like, obviously, like I had a lot of fun with this subject. You can tell by some of the stuff I spliced in, but a lot of folks go to haunted spots, which are creepy, and they record EVPs. And like, let's be real, like we will at some point in the future, like just record samples from some of the places we're going to go visit. If we had some like microphone recording equipment that was like transportable, we probably would have done so in the Winchester Mystery House. We just had the camera. There was nothing wrong with that, but at some point, maybe during a meetup, we'll try and record some stuff, especially if we're going to try and record an episode in the Stanley Hotel. That will be super interesting if we get to 150 patrons.
Yeah.
That said, there's a lot of stuff to cover for EVP. I only covered 2 of them. So I guess that leaves room for an EVP 2.0. If you folks like this episode and you're not like, I hated that audio, it blew out my eardrums. The only scary thing is that you made my ears bleed. But I don't know. Maybe next time we'll have some of our own shit, and that will be EVP 2.0. But that, my friends, is electronic voice phenomenon.
Thank you for that nightmare.
You're welcome. And it's like super late, so now you can go to sleep thinking about that. And hopefully all of you folks listening to this aren't getting ready to go to bed, and we're terrified by that also. So I had a really good time this episode. I think that you didn't, so I apologize for that. I am curious if our code words are going to show up
I
on
don't
this.
think so.
I'm almost going to guarantee it's not going to happen.
Are you just going to put in some random audio?
I already told myself that if our code words don't show up, I'm going to put in some stupid bullshit,
Oh
which
my
these folks have
God.
already heard at this point. So that's that. That was episode 85. So
Cool. Hope you guys enjoyed it. It was really fun. If you would like to support us and keep this podcast going, because we are run by you folks, go to patreon.com/scarishpodcast. Those are monthly donations. We have a whole bunch of tiers starting at $1. Right now I have a promotion going on where if you become a patron, there's summer exclusive merchandise for you folks. You get it first, and there's a promo code for 10% off our entire Teespring store, which is all our merch that we have. I mean, for $1 you can get 10% off all the stuff you could possibly want to buy from our Teespring store, which is great. And then we have coffee, ko-fi.com/scarishpodcast, and those are one-time donations, and those go to upgrading our studio setup and hopefully our computer that we literally run everything off of. So anything helps.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you folks have a story, you want to tell us what your never eat soggy waffles thing was, or you want to tell us what you thought of the episode, you can reach out to us at our email address, storytime@scarish.com. And you can also hit us up on our social medias. Instagram is @scarishpodcast. Twitter is @scarishpod. Facebook is facebook.com/scarishpodcast. Message us there. You can comment on any of our social media for whatever you like. And you can also go to our website, scarish.com, click on contact us. And if you want to send us a story, please do so. We would love to hear it. And I think that's just about everything that we have for this episode. So go ahead and sign us out.
Keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye-bye.